That feeling.
Yeah.
Wanting to connect deeply with someone, but also like really needing that essential you time, that space where you can just be. Today, we're diving straight into that fascinating intersection, how finding your footing on your own can actually be the best preparation for stepping into any relationship.
Exactly. And we've got a really insightful conversation to explore today. It's from Vietcetera's Yu Lan YouTube channel.
Okay.
Features Thuy Xuanan, and I guess we're just going to call B, who's a poet. And they really delve into this idea they call Vong Tron Riang Tu.
Vong Tron Ring Tu.
Yeah, essentially your personal private circle.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this then. Our goal in this deep dive is to really understand why having this personal space isn't just like a luxury, but maybe a fundamental need, and how it plays out with our natural desire for closeness. We're aiming for those moments where things just click and you think, aha, that makes sense. Bees and the hosts, they covered a lot of ground.
They really did.
From the simple joy of being alone to how our childhood experiences can shape our need for solitude, how it fuels creativity, and ultimately, how these individual private circles interact in our relationships.
So let's get into it. What's fascinating right off the bat is how B describes genuinely enjoying their own company. Like even before getting into romantic relationships.
Right.
They found that being alone allowed them to access their, quote, best version. A space where their creativity and imagination really, really thrived.
It kind of challenges the assumption that everyone's just constantly looking for a partner, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
So a key insight here is that this Vong Tron Riang Tu, this private circle, it can be a real source of strength and self-discovery.
That makes you think. While they didn't explicitly use labels like introvert or extrovert,
No.
Biad definitely highlights that for some of us, being alone isn't a negative thing to avoid. It's where we recharge, connect with ourselves.
Yeah. And they contrasted this with the feeling some people have. That love and care are things you offer to someone else. So being alone feels like, I don't know, a missed opportunity to express that love.
That desire to offer love, as they put it. That's an interesting way to phrase it. It could certainly pull some people away from seeking solitude.
Definitely. But this leads us right to the core concept, this Vong Tron Riang Tu, the personal private circle. And it's important to get this. It isn't just about physically being alone, is it?
Not at all, no. They talked about how you can be surrounded by people, maybe at work or, a party, but still maintain a distinct mental or emotional space.
Like an inner sanctuary.
Exactly. Like having an inner sanctuary, this ability to kind of create a bubble around yourself, even when you're not physically isolated. And the idea that you can learn to intentionally step in and out of that space when you need to, that really stood out to me as a crucial skill.
It's a crucial skill, absolutely. Think of this bubble of privacy as like a manifestation of that inner Vong Tron Riang Tu, but in a social context. It lets us keep our personal space even when we're physically with others.
Okay.
Now, C shared some really formative personal history that helps us understand their comfort with solitude. That was quite revealing, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Growing up, actually lived away from their family from a pretty young age, starting at 12, attending boarding school in Saigon.
12.
Yeah, and later moving to Australia and the U.S. for studies. That's a big chunk of life spent navigating things independently. And the takeaway here feels quite profound. Our early experiences, even ones that seem positive, like seeking better opportunities, they can deeply imprint our comfort level and our need for personal space later on as adults.
Understanding that history, it's key to self-awareness in relationships, I think. And while B described their childhood as happy, they also noted there wasn't one single consistent person right there beside them for a really long time. This early independence, it clearly played a role in shaping their relationship with being alone. It wasn't sudden, it was more like a gradual adaptation.
And the reason for living away wasn't negative, was it? Like within the family?
No, not at all. Ba mentioned their mother wanted them to have access to better schools, better educational opportunities in bigger cities.
That's interesting that Bai never questioned that decision. They understood their mother's perspective, even looking back now.
Yeah, that speaks to a certain level of maturity, maybe, understanding. And they also highlighted the positive side of boarding school, growing up with peers, sharing those really important developmental experiences.
So it wasn't complete isolation.
Exactly. That's an important nuance.
Yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And here's where it gets really interesting, I thought. Bai also brought up the unique influence of growing up in a family that was predominantly female and how that impacted their understanding of masculinity. They mentioned possibly learning what not to do by observing the experiences of the women around them, their mothers, aunts, grandmothers.
That's a fascinating perspective, isn't it? Almost learning by contrast. It suggests that solitude, in that case, might have given B a space to define their own sense of self, maybe outside of the traditional masculine roles they weren't constantly seeing up close.
So, fast forward a bit. Beaky mentioned experiencing romantic love later in life, in their 20s,
Mm-hmm.
and they shared this really powerful idea
Mm-hmm.
that you kind of deserve love when your character is strong enough to actually receive it.
Wow. Yeah, that ties right back to that initial idea, doesn't it? Finding that best version of yourself within your own private circle first.
It really does. It suggests that personal growth and, self-awareness are, in a way, prerequisites for healthy relationships. You need to feel grounded, secure in yourself before you can really connect with someone else properly.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The conversation also explored that kind of push and pull between needing solitude and wanting connection, specifically in creative work like music for B.
Right, that tension, needing to be alone for ideas to flow, but also that basic human desire for intimacy.
It's a classic tension in creative fields, I think,
Yeah,
and it often links to needing that focused attention and just how vulnerable those early ideas can feel.
yeah. And B used this really vivid analogy, feeling hot at the nape of the neck when someone gazes lovingly at them.
Hmm.
And it triggers this sudden urge to retreat, to protect that personal creative space.
Mhm.
It really highlights how even positive attention can feel intrusive sometimes, especially during that creative process.
It does, and they really emphasize the necessity of solitude for those creative ideas to actually emerge, to have
Yeah.
the space to breathe and develop without external influence.
But this can definitely lead to conflict in a relationship, can it? If a partner doesn't quite get that fundamental need for creative space.
Oh, absolutely.
They might misinterpret it as, you care more about your work than me.
Exactly. That fear a partner might have, feeling like they're coming second to work or art, that's a pretty common challenge, I think, in relationships with creative people. Bio even spoke about this idea of a wall.
A wall.
Yeah, like not wanting to completely break it down, comparing it to a slightly translucent screen, you can see through it, sort of, but it's not fully accessible. To maintain a sense of intrigue, maybe, personal depth.
That's a really helpful way to picture it. Visible but not entirely accessible. This idea of boundaries, it really seems to become clearer as we mature, doesn't it?
It does.
They talked about a bubble of privacy, transparent enough to see into, but still distinctly separate.
Yeah.
So this bubble is like the von Tron Ring 2 showing up in a social setting.
Yeah, letting us keep our personal space even when we're physically with others. And the concept of a safe distance in relationships evolving over time, that's so key.
Wow.
Well, that initial intense desire for constant closeness you often see early on, that can gradually shift towards needing more individual space as the relationship matures.
Okay.
And this is often where mismatched levels of maturity in understanding and respecting these personal boundaries can create friction.
Right. They shared experiences of wanting to enter someone else's private circle or having others try to enter theirs maybe before either person was really ready for that. It sounds like navigating this is a really delicate dance.
It absolutely is a delicate dance of mutual respect and understanding. And the recurring theme here, which we'll keep coming back to, is communication.
Always communication.
Always. B emphasized that trying to guess what someone else's private circle looks like or where its boundaries are, it's ultimately futile. You just have to talk about it. Openly, honestly.
And crucially,
Yeah.
you need to set aside your own ego when a partner says they need space. It's not usually a personal rejection, it's just a fundamental personal requirement for them. Which brings us to that really tricky dynamic.
Mhm.
Needing distance when you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, wanting reassurance that the connection, the affection, it's still there. It hasn't just vanished. That push and pull can be so confusing.
It really can. And it can lead to misunderstandings. B had touched on potential differences, maybe, in how men and women might interpret requests for space. But the key takeaways seem to be the importance of really trying to understand the often subtle hints partner might be giving.
Yeah, it's okay.
Apparently, women often don't leave their partners completely clueless.
Huh. Well noted. So it sounds like it's about making the effort to understand even if you don't get it perfectly right every single time.
Exactly. According to this conversation, valuing the attempt to understand someone's needs can be just as important as, perfect execution. It highlights empathy, doesn't it?
It really does.
Mm.
Now, B also reflected on past relationships, those times when personal boundaries were crossed. It really underscored the difficulty many people face in communicating those needs effectively.
Especially when you're worried about hurting someone's feelings.
Right. B described themselves as generally direct, kolako, yes means yes,
Yeah.
but also admitted to sometimes softening the truth if it might be painful. Still trying to give those hints, though.
Those all-important hints. And the conversation touched on that often unspoken assumption in long-term relationships, that personal space will just naturally merge completely over time.
Yeah, like you become one entity.
Right. Versus the reality that actually individual time and space remain vital for well-being even years down the line.
This assumption of complete merging, it can definitely lead to problems. Even in the deepest relationships, individual space is still vital for personal well-being and the health of the relationship itself.
They discuss different strategies for communicating this need for space, even mentioning sometimes resorting to using work as a convenient excuse.
Oh, yeah, the work excuse.
Acknowledging that there isn't always a perfect, totally pain-free way to have these conversations.
Relatable examples came up too, like just needing quiet time while trying to write or having those non-negotiable morning routines that require total solitude.
And that slightly paradoxical feeling, wanting immediate connection and closeness right after a period of intense privacy.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people can identify with.
This leads us to think about the broader context, maybe. The biological and social reasons behind our need for both connection and solitude. As humans, we are inherently social creatures.
Definitely. Our survival, our development as a species is dependent on strong social bonds, community.
But then there's this really interesting counterforce, what they referred to as kilut kasu, the rule of the individual, that deep-seated need for personal space.
So it's like this constant balancing act between our social needs and our individual requirements.
Exactly. And the analogy they used of solitary hunters, tigers, foxes needing their own space to hunt effectively and survive, but still having fundamental social needs for mating, raising offspring. It's a really insightful way to visualize this inherent duality, I think.
So in our own lives, maybe those times when we need to go into a kind of survival mode, intense work, focused creative projects.
Yeah, that might necessitate temporary solitude, even if we deeply crave connection afterwards.
They even brought in that hilarious example from the movie Ice Age.
Oh, right, with the characters fighting over the nut.
Yes, perfectly illustrating how those primal survival instincts can just momentarily override any sense of connection or community. It really boils down to this fundamental tension, doesn't it, between mine and yours.
The interplay between our ego and our need for personal space, precisely. And it really makes you reflect on the powerful nature of love, that it can sometimes make people seemingly forget those deep survival instincts.
Leading to acts of great compassion, selflessness.
Yeah. Yet, as the conversation pointed out, the fundamental struggle for personal space persists, even within the most harmonious, loving relationships.
And let's be honest, the thought that at the end of the day, people will ultimately choose themselves, that can be a tough pill to swallow sometimes.
It can be, but it does often ring true in difficult situations, doesn't it? While we might all hope for a connection so profound that we momentarily lose ourselves in it,
Right.
that inherent human need for self-preservation is a powerful force. However, Mara mentioned an interesting shift in their own perspective, saying that now they would choose love,
Oh, interesting.
perhaps indicating a greater sense of security now, self-understanding.
Which beautifully circles back to that earlier point about inner strength being such a crucial foundation. The biological imperative for pairing might be rooted in procreation,
Sure.
but our human spirit clearly needs so much more: deep emotions, meaningful connection. And perhaps the truest form of shared personal space is only really possible between two individuals who've cultivated a certain level of inner peace and security within their own Vong Tron Rieng Tu.
That's a really profound thought to consider. The conversation then shifted to really examine the underlying purpose of entering into a relationship in the first place.
Okay.
Like, are you primarily seeking unconditional acceptance for your authentic self, flaws and all? Or are you maybe trying to maintain a carefully constructed, perfect image?
These are two fundamentally different approaches, aren't they? Seeking genuine acceptance probably fosters a more fluid, accessible, private circle, one where you feel safe to just be yourself.
Whereas constantly trying to uphold a flawless facade might necessitate much stricter, more guarded boundaries. You're constantly protecting something that isn't entirely real.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this connects directly back to the creativity realm we talked about.
It does. Bia shared this really intriguing idea that artists might actually inhabit a different persona, a distinct version of themselves within their creative private circle.
Hmm.
And this isn't necessarily a persona they feel compelled to offer a romantic partner. It's not about intentional deception or hiding, but more about a part of themselves that might feel too raw, maybe, too intense, or simply not ready to be shared in that intimate way.
That really resonates. The personal example B shared about not wanting a partner to read a book while it's still being written.
Yeah.
That deep need to preserve the absolute freedom of thought, that completely unfiltered expression before it's ready for external eyes.
The mere awareness of being observed can absolutely stifle that fragile creative flow. It's like witnessing the messy, often frustrating process of creation versus just experiencing the polished final product.
Right. B is emphasis songwriting. You don't necessarily want someone to see all the discarded ideas, the wrong notes, the initial struggles.
Exactly. And they also touched on that almost transcendent feeling of being in a creative trance, that coveted flow state.
The zone.
Yeah, where you're so completely focused on the task that any external interruption feels jarring, unwelcome. Bien described these fleeting moments of what feels like pure genius within the songwriting process,
Leading, yeah.
often followed by the more conscious, deliberate work of bringing the whole piece together. It's rarely an effortless, sustained flow for most creators, I think.
Probably not.
But those intense moments of clarity and connection to the idea, they're often what drive the whole thing. And it was interesting to hear Bai mention generally not revisiting their completed works,
Oh,
yet hinting at deeply personal significance woven into their upcoming music. Subtle details a casual listener might not even pick up on, but which are absolutely crucial to the song's meaning and their personal journey.
like a secret language embedded in the art.
It really is. Now, they also introduced this really helpful visual intersecting private circles, almost like a Venn diagram of individual spaces.
Okay, I could picture that.
Exactly. The extent to which those circles overlap, they suggested, directly reflects the level of closeness in the relationship. And this intersection isn't static, it's dynamic,
Right, it changes.
constantly influenced by personal growth, shared experiences, individual maturity. You can have two circles that are quite far apart, geographically or emotionally, or beautifully, significantly overlapping, creating a rich, shared, private space.
That shared space, that
Yeah.
area where both people feel genuinely comfortable and safe to be themselves, both together and as individuals.
Yeah. It's not necessarily about merging into one single circle entirely. That might be unrealistic for most.
Hopefully.
But about finding that comfortable, respectful overlap where both closeness and the preservation of individual needs are equally valued. And as we've said, clear, open communication is absolutely essential for navigating this shared territory.
Absolutely.
And beyond just communication, they also touched on this fascinating idea of intuitive connection. That almost inexplicable, innate sense of compatibility, understanding you can sometimes feel with certain people.
Even before you really talk much?
Yeah, even before significant verbal communication. Almost like recognizing shared frequencies or, complementary private circles.
And finally, the conversation turned to exploring love songs as these powerful expressions of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And maybe even a pathway to emotional healing.
Right. Sharing even the painful, messy aspects of love through art can be a profound way of processing those complex emotions.
You use that poignant analogy of showing someone a burn.
Yeah. The listener might not be able to magically heal it, but they can bear witness to the pain. Be mindful of it.
So in that sense, sad love songs become a way of revealing those deep emotional wounds.
And B noted that their more recent music, the stuff that touches on sadness, carries a noticeably lighter tone, suggesting a genuine degree of healing and acceptance has actually happened over time.
Like the intensity of past experiences allows for a more gentle, reflective expression now.
Exactly. And this beautifully leads us to the final, really powerful thought from the discussion. Consciously reframing the feeling of loneliness, that sometimes negative word, kadunin.
Yeah.
Reframing it as embracing your private circle, your personal space, Hong Kong koyingmen. Not seeing it as a deficit, but as a positive, empowering state of self-discovery and healing.
A dedicated space where you can truly connect with and nurture your best version.
before that meaningful, anticipated intersection with another person's circle happens. The final message was really resonant. Everyone should actively cultivate and cherish their own private circle and patiently await those authentic, fulfilling intersections with others.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, the core message really hits home, I think. Understanding and deeply valuing your own private circle. It isn't selfish. It's actually foundational for building healthy, genuinely fulfilling relationships.
Yeah, it empowers you to enter those connections as a whole, strong individual, rather than looking for someone else to complete you.
And it really encourages all of us, you listening too, to take some time to reflect on our own boundaries, how we currently maintain our personal space, and how that intersects, or maybe sometimes clashes, with the lives of the people we care about most.
Definitely worth thinking about.
Exactly. So here's that final thought for you to really chew on. How does consciously cultivating and protecting your own private circle, that essential space just for you, ultimately impact the quality, the depth, and the overall health of your connections with others?
Good question.
It's definitely something to keep mulling over.
Ew.
Until our next deep dive.